Today's shiur begins at the bottom line of Daf Kuf Zayin Omid Beis, right after the Mishnah. In our previous shiur, we learned the Mishnah, which featured a man that went abroad, leaving his wife behind, and someone volunteered to support her out of pocket. Does he have recourse to recover his funds? Chonon said he lost his money. In other words, he has no recourse. And the Bnei Kohen Gedolim argue and say he can swear how much he spent and demand a refund or demand compensation for what he spent. The Gemara opens at the bottom, Tanan Hossam. A Mishnah appears there in Maseches Nedarim, which reads as follows: Hamudar hano mechavero, someone who vowed not to benefit his friend. In other words, he withdrew the possibility of his friend benefiting from him. Yet, shokel loy es shiklo, the person who vowed is allowed nevertheless to pay the annual machzis hashekel tax for his friend, uporea lo es choyvoi, and pay off his friend's debts, umachzir lo avidoso, and return a lost item. Before we go further, just want to point out in the topic heading that we have on the side, we've written the following: Devarim she mutorim lasois echad l'sheni she mudorim hano zeh mizeh. We have a situation where a vow was taken whereby they mutually will not benefit one another. And we've seen so far 3 points in reading the Tanaic source where even though they have vowed not to benefit one another, these things are allowed to be done. A second point that will be dealt with is Shnei Hezberim lahasbir al smach ma sover hatana demutu lo lefros choyvay afapisha muder hano mimenu. Point number 2 that we saw is particularly difficult to understand. How is it that one fellow can pay the debts owed by the other fellow when they're not allowed to benefit one another? The Tanaic source on the second line from the top continues and says, V'mokum shenoit limschar, in places where a fee is paid for returning a lost article. The fee for the trouble that one put himself out to do. In this case, so the fee cannot be paid to the one who did the returning, because then he is benefiting by receiving the fee. On the other hand, to just keep the money and not pay, that's also a benefit, because this is money that everyone else would have had to pay, and now you are keeping it, so you're benefiting from that, and you're not allowed to benefit from the other fellow. So the solution in this case is tipol hano lehektish. The fee is to be paid to the Beis Hamikdash fund. Bishlamo shokel loy es shiklo. I understand how that can be done. Mitzvah ka'ovid. It's a Torah precept. It's a mitzvah to pay the Masr shekel, and as a result of it being a mitzvah, it is not considered that I am benefiting him. And furthermore, the Machzis HaShekel was used to pay for public sacrifices through which everyone is said to have a share in the public sacrifices. The Rashi points out, as we will see shortly in the Gemara, that with regard to the halacha of Machzis HaShekel, with regard to this half shekel tax, truth is, even if the money that you paid never arrived in the Beis Hamikdash, let's say it got lost, or it hasn't been collected yet, you nevertheless get credit for the korbanos. So that the fact that the Machzis HaShekel was paid isn't really a direct benefit to you. The Gemara continues, Disnan, the Mishnah says, There's another Girsa Desanya, it's a Tanaic source, that says, Torman al ha'avud, v'al ha'govui, v'al ha'osid livos. Torman is the process of taking money from the Beis HaMikdash chamber and then using it for the purpose of buying korbanos for ovud, that's money that was sent to the Beis HaMikdash but got lost, al ha'govui, money that has been collected but didn't yet reach the Beis HaMikdash. We should point out that the monies were sent in the month of Adar, and the new fiscal year was in the month of Nisan. So it could very well be that people sent in their money from a distance, and it had not yet arrived in the Beis HaMikdash by the time Nisan, which is the month that follows Adar, it's the first month of the new fiscal year. So korbanos nevertheless are offered on behalf of all of the Jewish people. And v'ala osid likvos, even if the money hasn't been collected yet to begin with. Nevertheless, a person is said to have a portion in the korbanos. All it is that he misses out on the mitzvah. So the person who pays for someone else's masla shekel, he gets the mitzvah. But once again, let us repeat, the paying on behalf of your friend from whom you're not allowed to derive benefit and not allowed to grant him benefit is not considered a benefit. It's considered the fulfillment of a mitzvah. It's not necessarily related to this particular sugya. There's a concept that has relevance to the general realm of Nidorim, and it states mitzvahs lav lahenes nitnu. That's when you're performing a mitzvah, it's not considered as if you are receiving benefit. Benefit is more of a personal, non-divine nature. Number 3, umachsir lo avidaso nami mitzvah ka'avid, that I am returning to you your lost item. That act is an act of a mitzvah nature. It's almost as if we're saying it's between me and the Almighty that I am returning the lost item. It just so happens that you represent the vehicle through which I can fulfill the mitzvah. But it's not viewed as if I am directly benefiting you. Ella, poirea lo es choivoi. But this idea was the second of the 3 points we saw on the top of this Amid, that you have two people that forswore benefiting from one another, and yet I'm allowed to pay off your debts. That is, in fact, creating profit for you. Money that you would have had to lay out to pay the creditor, you're now saving that. The penny saved is the penny earned. Your savings of it is a profit to you. So I am causing you to profit. And how can that be when we have forsworn benefiting one another? So there are two approaches in the Gemara. Omar Rav Hoshaya, Homoni, Hononhi. This Tanaic source is authored by Honon, that we're familiar with from our Mishnah. The Omar, Chonon in our Mishnah said that when the fellow laid out money to support his friend's wife, he has no recourse in getting that money back. So the case of Porelos Chovo is in accordance with Chonon, the Omar Ibeid es Ma'oisav. Now, this is an example of a very terse piece of Gemara. In order to understand it, though, we look at Rashi. Chonanhi Domer Ibeid Ma'oisav. Zesh Shapirnes is Eshes Chavero. There was the fellow featured in the Mishnah who supported his friend's wife after his friend took a journey abroad, leaving her behind. V'niskavein l'shem halva sheyashalim lo bailo. The fellow who laid out the money for her had the intention that I'm loaning him the money. I'm loaning the money in anticipation of her husband paying me back. And yet, Chonon says, Ibeid Ma'osav, you lost your money. And the fellow who laid out the money cannot say, Es choivcha parati shalemli, I paid your debt. In order to support your wife, that's your debt. I paid off your debt, now you pay me. Can't say that. V'yomad chaveru poro, v'zelo omer lo halveni. Any case that's similar to that, where you have a debt and your friend comes along and voluntarily pays off your debt without having been asked, would you kindly loan me some money so the debt could be paid off? Eino chayav lo klum. You acted on your own, and I, whose debt was paid off by you, am not obligated to you anything. V'kevon de'ilu pare l'shem halvo, lav halvo hi, and therefore, since if the fellow who's paying off his friend's debt pays it off with this intent to get paid back, that's l'shem halvo. I'm paying it as if I'm laying out a loan for you. It's not considered a loan. It's not considered a loan that you can get a refund or get compensated for. Ki pare nami l'shem mechila lav midi yohivle. Even if you pay it with the idea of not getting compensated for it, it's still not considered as if he gave him anything. So, in simple words, it sounds very nice that he's paying off his friend's loan, but since the guy paying off the loan had no way of ever seeing that money back, never getting compensation for it, it's considered as if he gave him nothing. And using the term of chonon, it's called lost money, or if you want to be more crass about it, it's like you threw out your money. So throwing out money is not considered benefiting the friend. There might be, we'll call a collateral benefit, but it's not considered a level of benefit that would be a violation of the vows. That's the approach Rav Oshaya takes. The Rav Omar, afilu temo rabbonon. You can say that the source on the top is in accordance with Rabbanon, who disagree with Chonon, who say that when money is laid out with a loan intention and you pay off your friend's debt, you're allowed to, even without being asked, would you lay out money for me? Even without that, you can get your debt back. The case over here is Hocha b'mayaskinon shelova almanas shelo lefroa. The fellow who took a loan out, borrowed money with the stipulation that he need not pay back. So if I borrowed money and I don't need to pay back, you're coming and paying off the loan isn't benefiting me. I didn't need that anyway. You see how Rashi adds another dimension of understanding. We try to cover the points, but let's go through Rashi inside the text. Rashi, where we left off, Afilu Temo Rabbonon Diamri Chayav. Even according, you can set up the source at the top, which dealt with the fellows that forswore benefit from one another, in accordance with the Rabbonon. Afalpi that say in where loans are paid off for where one pays off another's loans, he is able to seek compensation. Afalpi shelo amar lo halveni v'gabi shar chov nami chayav l'shalem. Not only in the case of the wife, but in all loans, the fellow who voluntarily pays off his friend's loan is able to seek compensation. And when one pays off a loan and does so in a forfeiting, forgiving fashion, that still would be Ozer. And why is that Ozer? Because it's money that you could have recovered from him. Now that I'm not taking the money from, I'm not demanding the money back, I'm forfeiting it. That's considered giving him benefit. The source on the top that said he is allowed to pay off the friend's debt, even though they're mudur hano zemizeh. The loan was taken out with the following stipulation, that the money is being borrowed with the condition that it need not pay back until I want to pay it back. Lo yuchal hanoishe lelochzo, the creditor has no right to pressure its payback. Hilkoch lav midi yohiv lei. Therefore, when his friend pays off such a loan, he's not said to be giving the borrower anything. The Gemara continues, analyzing these two opinions, Rav Oshaya and Rava. Why did each one not say like the other? Bishlamo Rava lo omak Rav Oshaya. I understand that Rava did not follow Rav Oshaya's path. The Moikim law Karabonan. Through Rava's explanation, we're able to set up the unnamed Tanaic source according to a majority opinion. Ela Rav Oshaya, my time aloma Karava. Rav Oshaya, he chose to set up the source on the top as a minority opinion, the opinion of Chonon. Why does he not follow Rava's approach? Namely, that it was now, the Rava's approach states that loans that are paid off by friends, those friends can demand compensation in general. Why over here did Rava say it can be paid off? Because it was a loan that was almanas shelo lefroa. It was a loan that was extended with the stipulation that it need not be paid back. Well, that sounds good. Why doesn't Rav Oshaya set up the source like that? Omar loch Rav Oshaya. Nihi dano Leslie. Granted that there is no hano, there's no actual benefit, as we said, because the loan need not have been paid up. However, the Gemara continues at the top of Omid Beis. Kisufa mi lesle. Is there not an element of embarrassment that is now being saved by the friend? We take a look at Rashi at the top. Kisufa mi lesle. The komichsif min amal v'tomid. Fellow borrowed money. Okay, stipulated that I'm borrowing this with the condition that it need not be paid back. But as long as the loan isn't paid back, is there not a level of, let's say, shame or embarrassment that the borrower experiences from these embarrassed from this malva from the lender? Hilkoch I rabbanon hi the amri lechov lovan as lefra ufora chovo ufora chaver b'shvilo chayv l'shalem. If we're going to set this source up according to the Rabbana that said, in general, people that took regular loans with the expectation of having to pay back the loan, and your friend comes and pays that up for you, you, the borrower, have to pay back your friend. And in the case of a mudur hano, where you're paying back the loan with a forfeiting nature, where you don't expect the original borrower to pay you back, it still is Ozer. So ki lovo almanas shelo lifroa nami hanohi. Even when the loan was taken with the stipulation not to be paid back by the original lender, was understood he wouldn't have to pay it back, there nevertheless is hano umechilo mochil gabei, and the mechila, the forfeiting or the, let's say, the non-payback is still the osir. It's still going to be osir, and as we explained, because of the embarrassment that now by the friend paying off the loan, the original borrower doesn't have to experience that feeling of shame. The next line, until the Mishnah, there are some versions that don't include it in the text. In other words, it's not in their girsa. So, for the sake of simplicity, we'll adopt that approach and pick up now with the Mishnah. Admon Omer Shiva. Admon, one of the Dayone Gzeros that we were introduced to at the beginning of the Perek, he has taught, or there are 7 halachas that are presented in his name. So we finished the 2 halachas in the name of Chonon, and now 7, and this lasts till Daf Kuf Yud Amud Aleph. So we have the Tanakama first, and then Admon. You can see that we have a special geometric form, a crown shape, on the side of the Gemara under our Mivneh heading. You can see we indicate Daf Kuf Yudam and Aleph, Hadgoshes Amon, the crown will be used to highlight Admon, Shiva Dinim Shel Admon, the 7 halachas of his. As we go on in this Mishnah, you'll notice at the end a double underline, Omar Rabbi Gamliel, Roe Ani Es Divrei Admon, and this marking is Miuad Lahavlota Litzorach HaGemara Ba'omud Haba on Daf Kuf Tes Omed Aleph. When we get there, Mirz Hashem, this marking will be of benefit. So now the Mishnah. The Tanakama says, Mi shemeis v'niach bonim u'bonos, someone who died who left sons and daughters, Bisman shenechosim Reuben, when the estate is of significance, there's a lot of value in the estate. Habonim yorshim vabonos nizonos. There's enough in the estate for the sons to inherit and for the daughters to be supported from. They're supported until they get married. We've seen this extensively in the context of Benon Nukvin in the past. Ubenechosim uotim, where the estate is of limited value, and Rashi quotes the Gemara in Bava Basra that says it is limited to the extent that there isn't enough value to support the sons and daughters for 12 months. So there isn't enough to cover the support for both. That's called nechasim watim. What do we do then? Habonos yazunu vabonim yasru lapsochim. The daughters can draw support from those nechasim, and the sons they don't get any of it. They have to knock on doors for their own support. They have to seek handouts. Admon Omer Bishvil Shani Zochar Hifsadati Omar Rabban, and he says that in a tone of wonderment, because I'm a male and they're nechosim watim, I have to lose out. In order to understand this, we'll see a little bit more about that in the Gemara. Omar Rabbi Gamliel Roani es divrei Admon. Rabbi Gamliel feels that Admon's claim is the stronger, and that in nechosim watim there should be an inheritance for the sons as well. My Ko'omar. The expression of Admon in the Mishnah is not clear. Rashi says, My Ko'omar, Im b'shvil shani zocher hifsadati, mashma im b'shvil shani zocher v'koichi yofe hifsadati. Just because I'm a male and I have greater strength, I should lose out. Umau yipui kocho. What we want to understand is, what is this added strength? And we're not talking about physical strength, that's very clear, but some kind of advantage that he has as a male, and therefore he shouldn't lose out. What is that advantage? Omar Abai Hochi Komar Bishvil Shani Zohar V'Roy Lasot B'Torah Hifsadati. Because I'm a male, and in Torah law, only men have the obligation of Torah study. Women do not have the obligation of Torah study. If they study Torah or not is another question. That there's a mitzvah involved, maybe it's a nice thing to do, whatever, that is a separate story. But in terms of obligation, only the males are obligated in Torah study. So the Admon is speaking on behalf of the sons, the male children, and saying, because I'm a male and I have a Torah obligation, an obligation to study Torah, I should lose out. Rava objects to Abaye's explanation. Rava says that your explanation makes it sound like man de'osik b'Torah diyoris, one who studies Torah is capable of inheriting. Man de'lo osik b'Torah lo yoris, someone who doesn't study Torah is not in the category of one who inherits, and that's ridiculous. Inheritance is a Torah granted right. It has nothing to do with whether you study Torah or not. Elo Omar Rava Hochi Komar. So Rava now gives us his interpretation of what Admon was saying about the advantage that a Zohar has, and as a result he should not have to lose out. And thusly he is saying, B'shvil shani zochar, v'roi lirash b'nechasim merubin, hifsadati b'nechasim watim. Had there been a large estate, so as a male, I have the sole right of inheritance. Girls in Torah law do not inherit their fathers when there are sons present. So I, who am a zochar, and there are nekevos here, but as a zochar, I have the inheritance rights in a large estate. Now that it's a small estate, I lose out completely. So that is the explanation of Admon, who said what he did, but as you can see, the Chachomim disagree that in Nechasim U'atim, in fact, the sons lose out or are deprived from inheriting. As you can see, we now are about to start another Mishnah. Another crown appears, and we've numbered it number 2. We didn't mention earlier, but we're using a numbering scheme all the way from here till the number 7, which you'll find on Daf Kuf Yud Amud Aleph. So you can scan down the page very easily to find the 7 halachas of Admon. The next Mishnah, Hato'ein es chavero kadei shemen v'hoda bekankanim. Now there's a Mishnah here that I'm not going to say that it's out of context, because the reason these Mishnayos are here is to feature the machlokes, or the 7 halachas of Admon. Nevertheless, this Mishnah, it's like its real place is in Masechet Shavuos. So the sugya, this Gemara, from here till the end of today's shiur, till the bottom line, is a sugya that is built upon major concepts and precepts that govern the laws of oaths, of Shavuos. In the realm of Shavua, of needing to take a vow in areas of monetary concern, especially when you have a controversy between 2 people, and one is making a demand of the other, does the other, in denying the demand made of him, does he have to swear or not? So there's a concept that's very well known. It's called moide b'miktsas, one who confesses partially. And this is based on psukim in the Torah, as the Chazal darshan the psukim in the oral law, in the Gemaras. We learn that when someone is responding to a financial demand and he concedes partially, the Torah expects him to swear that the other amount, the other half, so to speak, the other fraction that you're demanding of me, I am not chayev. And we'll see examples of that here, but like the simplest case is Mr. A says to Mr. B, you owe me $100, and Mr. B says, what do you mean I owe you $100? I owe you only $50. The other 50 I do not owe you. And that when he says that other 50 I do not owe you, he swears regarding that. He swears. It's called a shvua liftor. That's a shvua doraisa, a shvua to exempt oneself. We've seen this concept also earlier in this Masechta. The topic heading, therefore, you can see on the side we've written moide b'miktsas, partial. We'll call it partial confession. So the Mishnah, Hatoin es chavero kadei shemen v'hoide bekankanim. A person is demanding from his friend to pay him. Kadim are vessels that are like pitchers or small barrels full of oil, and the one who is being claimed from responds and concedes, I owe you empty vessels. Empty vessels, meaning the empty ones without the oil in it. You're asking me for vessels and oil. I concede that I owe you empty vessels. Admon omer hoyo v'hoyde b'miktsas hatayna yishava. Admon says, since there's partial confession, he has to swear regarding the rest that he does not owe. V'chachomim omrim ein hoidoas miktsas mimin hataina. The partial confession does not contain within it the essence of the original claim. And when there's this like lack of matching, where the response or the partial confession does not reflect the original claim, there is an exemption. This, by the way, is still quite abstract. We'll need examples, and we'll see more of this in the Gemara. But in the meantime, we see a machlokus between Admon saying that this case represents moide b'miktsas, which demands a shvua be taken, and the Chachamim say it doesn't conform to the rules of moide b'miktsas. Amar Rabbi Gamliel, roye ani es divrei Admon. Now the Gemara. One wants to draw some conclusions. Shma mino l'Rabbanan. Should we conclude, according to the Rabbanan, that said that there was exemption? Well, exemption in what case? So far the way we understand things, but subject to change, so far the way we understand things is that a claim of 2 items was made, pitchers with oil, and the confession was a confession of only one of the 2 items. And the Rabbanan say exemption. So should we conclude from here, Ta'ano chitim u'sa'orim v'hoide b'sa'orin potter, that if A claims from B, you owe me wheat and barley, and B says, I owe you only barley, he would be exempt. Now, if we say that, should we say then this serves as a refutation of Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel's law? The Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel, Ta'ano chitim u'sa'orim, where A claims from B, you owe me wheat and barley, v'hoide lo be'echad mehen, and B concedes, I owe you one of them, chayav, you are obligated to swear. That is a case of moide b'miktsas. So at this point in the Gemara, by presenting the Mishnah as we did, and I said it's subject to change, but presenting it as we did, that the claim was for pitchers and oil, and the confession was for only one of the items. Yes, I owe you pitchers, but I don't owe you the oil. That is like Ta'ano chitim u'sa'orim v'hoide lo be'echad mehen. The Rabbanan in our Mishnah say exempt, and this Amora, Rav Nachman, in the name of Shmuel, says you're obligated. So here you have a case of an Amora saying a halacha that is refuted by the Shitas Chachamim, by the majority opinion in the Mishnah. That's not good. So do we have any way of defending Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel? As we go on in the Gemara, you'll notice a triangle marking, and there's some numbering on the side of the Gemara. The house shape, under the Mivneh heading, the house shape represents De'os Chalukos Binyatano Chitim U'Sarm V'Hoide Lo Be'echad Mehem. A claim made for 2 items, and the confession of one of the 2 items. Does that constitute Modeh B'Miktsas? Does that constitute partial admission in order to obligate a shvua to be taken, an oath to be taken? There are 2 opinions. You see, Rav Nachman, Omar Shmuel, he says chayav. If you skim down the page, Reb Chia bar Abba, regarding the same case of Ta'ano chitim v'sa'orim v'hoide lo be'echad mehem, he rules potter, exemption. Well, at this point, we're dealing with Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel that says Ta'ano chitim v'sa'orim v'hoide lo be'echad mehem, and concedes to one of them, he is chayav. So is that then refuted by the Chachamim in our Mishnah? The triangle is explained. These are Gimel Hezberim b'Macholkim Admon v'Chachamim. We have 3 Hezberim to explain what is the case that Admon and Chachamim are really arguing about. We have this clear Amoraic statement of Ta'ano chitim u'sa'orim v'hoide lo be'echad mehen. Chayav, is that case, in fact, reflected by our Mishnah, or possibly our Mishnah is talking about something that's dissimilar, and therefore the Mishnah doesn't pose any threat to Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel. Omar Rav Yehuda Omar Rav. First triangle, the exemption of the Chachomim in the Mishnah is B'toyanu Midah. The taina, the claim, is for oil alone. An amount, a certain amount of oil. In the Mishnah we saw Hatoynes Chavir Kadei Shemen. That is someone claiming you owe me a certain amount of oil. And what does the responder say? I owe you barrels, I owe you pitchers. So that's not moda b'miktsas. That's not a partial confession. That's a confession of an item that was never claimed in the first place. That type of, we'll say, give and take, claim and response doesn't warrant a shvuah to be taken. The Gemara says, if that's what's going on in the Mishnah, then ihochi mai taimo da admon. Why would Admon say he's chayav to take a shvuah on the grounds of moda b'miktsas? That's what Admon said. He said hoyel v'hoida b'miktsas atayna. That's not moda b'miktsas. We gave you an example before of moda b'miktsas. I claim $100, and you can see I owe you $50. I concede to still owing part of what you claimed. Here, if the claim was for a certain amount, mido means an amount, a quantity of oil, and the respondent says, I owe you barrels, there's no partial confession regarding the oil. It's not therefore called moda b'miktsas. Why would Admon say chayav v'shvuah? Elo omar Rava. Rava presents the machlokes Admon and Chum, but before he does so, he goes to two initial steps on points that there really is no controversy. The controversy arises only at the third step. And that's what you can see we've done with the markings. You have the expression Dukule Alma and Ki Pligi. So that under what circumstances does the machlokes arise, that appears only when you get to the Ki Pligi double underline. So Rava tells us as follows. Dukule Alma, that means Admon and the Chachomim agree. And we have a very important note that we've written in between the lines, and that is, remember, as you go through this Gemara, that the confessor in the Mishnah was confessing an outstanding debt of kankanim, of pitchers. Again, the one from whom the demand was being made, he says, he concedes, yes, I owe you pitchers. Just remember that. So now, Rava tells us that Kuli Alma, there is consensus, Hechadi Omar, Malo Asora Kade Shemen, Yesh Li Beborcha. Borcha is in your pit. Oil is stored in pits. So someone is claiming Malo Asora Kade Shemen. What's he claiming? Shemen kotoin le, kankanim lo kotoin le. That language of Asora Kade Shemen means oil. I have 10 pitchers worth of oil in your bore, and you owe me that. You have to return that to me, or you owe it to me. And then the respondent says, I owe you pitchers. So in Shavuos parlance, that's called Ta'anochita v'hola b'sorim. I claim one thing and you concede to me another. That is not called modeh b'miktsas. That's not called partial confession. And that would, in the case we just described, claim for oil, responds, I owe you pitchers. That would not warrant a shvuah, and there's consensus on that. Another case, Asora Kadei Shemen Maleim Yeshli Etzlecha. If the claimer says, I have 10 pitchers full of oil in your possession that I want you to give me, Shemen v'kankanim kotoyin lei. That is a claim of two things. And then when the responder says, I don't owe you both of the things you're asking from me, but I owe you one of the things you're asking from me. There's agreement, Rava will tell you. Agreement that what? Now here, don't forget, we're trying to defend Rav Nachman or Shmuel. So there is agreement then that you would be chayav a shvua, that when two items are demanded of you and you concede to owing one of those two items, that's called moida b'miktsas, partial confession, and that would be chayav. He pligi, when does the machlokas Admon and the Chomim arise? Heicha the Omar lay, where the claim was put in for asora kadei shemen yesh li etzlecha. Notice the difference between this, and this is Gimel, and the Beis, is that here you don't see the word mileim. You see the expression 10 pitchers of oil I have by you. Again, we repeat what we mentioned earlier. We know what the confession is. He concedes or confesses to owing pitchers. What's the claim, though? Admon Omer, yesh b'loshen hazeh loshen kankanim. That in requesting, in demanding, or putting a taina in a claim of asora kadei shemen, that implies pitchers with oil in it. So that asora kadei shemen means, in addition to the oil that's being claimed, there is also an expression of pitchers. It's not a claim of a measure of oil, but rather it's a claim of pitchers and oil. And it's like the case of toano chitim usorim. You owe me wheat and barley. You owe me, in this case, pitchers and oil. And the fellow concedes, I owe you only pitchers. Okay, that's Admon, and that's called moida b'miktsas. For Rabbanan Safri, the Rabbanan hold that in this particular language of asora kadei shemen yesh li etzlecha, they hold ein b'loshen hazeh loshen kankanim. That expression does not imply pitchers at all. So that what you're left with is there's a taina, there's a claim of oil alone, and there's a confession of pitchers. And that's like a case of toano chitim v'hodelo b'sorim. A claim is you owe me wheat, and the other fellow responds and says I owe you barley, and there would be no need for a shvua. So the machlokes between Admon and the Chachomim concerns a specific loshon, a specific version of the claim, and that being the case, it's not. This doesn't represent a threat to Rav Nachman or Shmuel, because the case that the Chachamim were saying there is exemption for, it's because the perception of the Chachamim regarding that language was that it was a claim of only a solitary item, not two items. And Rav Nachman or Shmuel spoke about a claim where there were two items and one of them was confessed. But now this leads us into a question. Ela taimo di'ein b'loshen hazeh loshen kankanim. So as far as our understanding of the Chachamim right now, why is there an exemption from a shvua? Is because the taina was not a multiple oriented taina. It was a singular solitary item in the taina, in the claim. And in this case, it was a taina of oil alone without pitchers as well. According to the Chachamim, the way we're inferring things right now is that had the claim been clearly a claim of both items, pitchers and oil, and the respondent says, I owe you only one of the items, then there would be chiyuv. That's chayav. He would have to take a shvua. Again, he would take the shvua even according to the Chachamim. Wow. Well, this presentation of the Chachamim would then refute the Amoreic opinion of Rav Chia bar Abba. The Omer Rav Chia bar Abba A claim of 2 items of you owe me wheat and barley, and keeping the parallel, you owe me pitchers and oil. Potter, and the respondent says, I owe you only one of the items. According to Reb Chia bar Abba, he would be exempt. But how did we explain the Chachamim just a moment ago? That had the original claim been in for 2 items, and the confession is with regard to one of those 2 items, the Chachamim would have said Chayev. So do we have a situation now that we have the majority opinion in the Mishnah refuting Rabbi Chia bar Abba? So in defense of Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Rav Omer of Simi bar Ashi, he comes to explain that the nature of a claim of pitchers and oil is not parallel to a claim of chitim and soirim. Why? Naase kemisha toanoi rimoin beklipaso. It's the relationship of pitchers containing oil is like a rimon, a type of fruit. Many often translate that as a pomegranate in its klipa, in its shell or in its peel, where a person claims you owe me a pomegranate fruit in its peel. It's one entity. It's not 2 entities. And someone who confesses to owing half a pomegranate, that's called moida b'mixas, and therefore a claim of pitchers with oil in them, and he concedes, I owe you the pitchers, is like the case of Rimo Bikli Paso. It's not 2 items. However, if the claim was for 2 distinct items, like chitim and sa'irim, and confession to one of them, that's not modeh b'miktsas, and that would be exempt. So, according to Rav Simi bar Ashi, the case that the Chachamim were featuring, where there is an obligation, where there is confession on the pitchers, and which obligates him in taking the oath, that is different than the case that Reb Chia bar Abba spoke about. Maskif lo Ravina. Ravina says, I can't accept your parallel. Rimon belokli paso lo mintar. The fruit content of a pomegranate without its peel, lo mintar means it can't be preserved. It doesn't last. It has very short shelf life. It's not preserved. Literally, it's not guarded. However, shemen mintar below kankanim. Shemen, for its preservation, it's not dependent solely on the pitcher. You can keep shemen stored in pits, so that the oil and the pitchers might, in fact, yes, be like 2 items. And then we're back to where we started with the Kasha and Reb Chia bar Abba from the Shitas Chachamim, who said exempt. Ela hocha b'mayaskinon. Here's a third approach in explaining what's the claim and what's the response in the Mishnah. With this explanation, we will not have to say we have a refutation of Reb Chia bar Abba. So what's the case in the Mishnah? The Omar Lei, the Tovea, the claimer, says, Asora Kadi Shemen Yeshli Etzlacha. There are 10 pitchers of oil that I have by you. In other words, you owe me. The Omar Le'idoch, and the responder, the one from whom the claim was being made, responds, Shemen Lohoyu Dvora Me'olam. As far as oil is concerned, it never was. I never had any oil of yours. I don't. Kankanim Nami, regarding the pitchers as well, that you're asking for 10 pitchers of oil, Chamisha Isloch v'Chamisha Lesloch. 5 pitchers I owe you, 5 I do not. So that is the situation in the Mishnah. Admon Omer, Yesh b'loshon hazeh loshon kankanim. In the initial teviyah, the initial claim, which was what? You can see it very clearly. Asora kade shemen yesh li'etzecha. In that language, there was contained an expression of pitchers, a claim for pitchers. So if in the initial claim there was a claim of essentially 10 pitchers, and the confession was one of, I owe you only 5, so there's a modeh b'miktsas regarding the pitchers. Omigu dekam mishtaba kankanim, and since he's taking a shvur regarding the pitchers, mishtaba nami hashemen al yedei gilgul, will make him swear regarding the oil as well through this mechanism called gilgul. It means to roll over. In other words, we roll, once you are expected to take one oath which has a solid basis, a torah basis, we are entitled to make you swear about another item concerning which you wouldn't have been made to swear initially. But since it's part of a case involving a shvua that needs to be taken, we can make you take the shvua regarding the other item as well. So even though regarding the oil there was total denial, and that's called in general, in shvua's terms, it's called kofer bako. And we know that one who is in total denial, he does not have to swear to back up his claim. In this case, though, since he is made to take an oath regarding the pitchers, and the only reason for that is because Admon understands the initial claim to be a claim of pitchers as well, he can be made to take a shvua on the oil as well. In that claim of Asora Kadeh Shemen Yesh Li'etzecha, there's no implication of pitchers being claimed to begin with. So what was being claimed? 10 pitchers worth of oil. Oil was being claimed. What was being confessed? Pitchers. Mashetano lo hodalo, that which was being claimed, namely oil, was not being admitted to. Total denial on the oil. Umasha hoidalo lo tano, and that which was being confessed, namely, I owe you 5 pitchers, but there was never a claim for pitchers put in the first place. And with claims and responses like that, there is no grounds for a shvur to be taken. And that's why the Chachamim in the Mishnah said, potter. But once again, that is this third interpretation of what the machlokes in the Mishnah was. And you can see that with that interpretation, you're not challenging Reb Chia bar Abba, because as far as we are concerned, the Mishnah was not talking about a clear claim. Certainly through the eyes of the Chachamim, there wasn't a clear claim of 2 items. There was a claim of oil and a response of pitchers. Reb Chia bar Abba spoke about a claim of 2 items, chitim and saorim, and the respondent says a response to one of them, and he ruled what he ruled. He ruled potter. But as we say, that's not the case that the Mishnah was talking about. Let us point out a detail that Rashi mentions, and that is that in this case, had the original claim, according to the Chachamim, included within it a claim of pitchers, 10 pitchers as well as oil, and the respondent says, I don't owe you 10 pitchers, but I owe you only 5 pitchers, Reb Chia bar Abba would have agreed that is shvua worthy. That's not the case of Toano Chitim Usorim and Hodol Be'echol Mehem. In order for Reb Chia bar Abba to acknowledge a shvua, there would have to be a partial confession of one of the items being claimed. But as we said, as far as the Chachomim in the Mishnah are concerned, there wasn't even a claim of pitchers to begin with. And hence the response of partial pitcher owing doesn't constitute grounds for a shvuah to be taken. With that, we conclude our shiur for today.